I'm the president of Frontier Dental Laboratory, which is a proud member of the Denbright Dental Laboratory platform. I have been with Frontier for over 30 years, and we joined the Denbright platform 6 years ago. And with that, we have got a collection of best-in-class dental laboratories across the United States that serves all 50 states, actually, and other countries. My laboratory partners, my brethren, they're also part of that. The very well-known laboratories you might know is Absolute Dental Services in North Carolina, Jason K. Kim Dental Laboratory Aesthetics in Long Island, New York, where Dr. Langstein is, Friendship Dental Laboratory in Maryland, New Art Dental Laboratory in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, DNS Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin, Burbank Dental Laboratory in Southern California, and Frontier Dental Laboratory in Northern California. And we do have where I'm at right now in Northern California, and a location up in Vancouver, British Columbia. We're very proud to bring you continuing education. I'm a big believer in continuing education, as you can probably imagine. And we are, with the help of Dr. Levine, I'm excited to bring you Dr. Ira tonight, talk about one of my favorite topics, implants. And keep your eyes open for more Denbright sponsored webinars through Dr. Levine throughout the rest of the year. So very excited to be here. Without any delay, I'll turn it back over to you guys. And thank you very much, Dr. Levine and Dr. Langstein.
My pleasure. And Ira, take it away. We're looking forward to it.
Thanks so much. Much appreciated. And I want to welcome everybody here tonight. We're going to have a very special event talking about anatomic and custom emergence profile. Now, this is a topic which is an old concept, emergence profile, and we've struggled with this for years. And we struggled with healing abutments for years that are not anatomically shaped. And it's really led to a number of implant restoration compromises. One of the reasons this happened is we really didn't have a workflow to be able to do the things that we're going to talk about tonight. So as a restorative dentist, it's super important to latch onto this. And as a surgeon, we'll see how we work in concept with this. I do want to thank everybody for coming out on a work night. It's kind of difficult and it's much appreciated. And I'm going to try to make it worth your while. It's going to be a casual talk. We're going to go through some things. I also want to have a shout out to Frontier and Denbright, as Brent talked about. It's super important to partner with the lab, and we're going to talk about some of those things as we move forward. So last but not least, I want to shout out to Dr. Levine. He is a special personality to be able to bring us together, and we learn through sharing in our field. You know, dentists are typically solo practitioners, and it's very difficult for us to do things on our own. We need help, and so by Dr. Levine bringing us together, it very much helps us in many, many ways. So let's get started. I'm calling you from Long Beach, New York. This is where I live. It's on Long Island. It's a nice little town on the South Shore. And we talk about the digital workflow. And this term has been played out over and over. But what does it actually mean? It's really a combination of a number of things. It centers around this intraoral or IOS scan, but that's not enough to do what we have to do. We have to go ahead and holistically start to talk and break this down, because we need that scan, but at the end, we need a properly restored implant. And that's where our laboratories are going to come in. And the main concept here is we're going to talk about obtaining emergence profile and then communicating that with our lab. Excuse me, and we're doing that in the environment of newer implants and a newer paradigm. So for us restorative doctors, we have to understand that the emergence profile is not the same as it was years ago. We have narrow abutments. We have subcrestal implants. Our labs have to know what we're doing so we don't have size mismatches. We also have some incredible new technology coming out. This is the anatomic healing abutment. And as we'll talk about, this has a dual use. And we're going to set up a workflow or a rubric. So if a patient comes into your office next week and we want to plan out emergent profile, how can we do it? So we're going to jump in. It's all going to go around this concept that we call good to great. So even for straightforward or what would be called simple cases, which I don't think there are any, we're going to go ahead and start at surgery with our surgeons, build emergence profile. We're going to capture emergence digitally. But most importantly, our laboratory is going to understand what materials we need. We're going to have polished zirconia. We're going to have titanium. We're not going to have glazed porcelain, subgingival, and I'll get into that. And so what seems like sending your surgeon a patient and just place an implant on tooth number 3 and I'll see you in 3 months, that rubric is leaving now. And we're getting into a customized type of procedure where we can look at each patient individually. Now, I'm going to put up my contact information throughout, and also Frontier Labs, Denbright, because I want to open a conversation with everybody. This is the first time we're meeting, but I don't want it to be the last. And we're going to talk a lot about this. And ultimately, under everything that we do, we have to understand why we're doing it. And I tend to ask myself before every treatment, why am I doing this? And I have to know why I'm doing it. And it's not just replacing a tooth. I want to know why I'm doing an immediate load. Why am I delaying a case with my surgeon? Why are we asking for surgical guides when some people use them and some people don't? And when you know why you want emergence profile, we also have to know what to do. So the rubber's going to hit the road on how we actually digitally capture this for our labs. And if you ask any lab tech, and Brent, I'll get up with you in a bit on this, but our lab techs can only deal with what we give them. The more information we give them, the better result that we can get. And one of the things that they have trouble getting is the emergence profile, simply because our componentry is not anatomic. And when you look at a scan abutment, it certainly doesn't fill up the emergence. So we have to engage our scanners to be able to capture that emergence and send that on to the lab. We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to have to understand, and this is crucial, that in 2025, implants are shaped differently. Their placement is different. The abutments are narrower. Many times we have bone that's going over the platforms of our implants. We can't rely on the lab tech to make prosthetic decisions for us unless they understand what we're doing, and that's where the communication comes in. So that's great. So what we're going to talk about today is that digital workflow. I'm going to go over some techniques and how to make custom healing abutments, and then how to communicate that with the lab. That is sort of the nexus of what we're going to talk about. And then how do we restore? Even basic cases, how can we do this? So let's kind of jump in here. This is the world that most surgeons live in and that most restorative dentists live in. You get an implant and you get a round circle that comes back, and the lab has to miraculously make an oval or a rectangle or a triangle, which are the cross sections of natural teeth. We wind up with these, where we get a perfectly integrated implant, but we can't even fit our components in. And our technician looks at this and has to score the cast, or maybe even the surgeon has to put a releasing incision. It's no good. We were in a habit of taking a patient like this and building the emergence after surgery, after integration, with a provisional crown, and we've added on cost and months. And so the largest barrier for acceptance in our field, as we know, is cost and time. So we have to find a better way. And what we want to do is generate this at the time of surgery, so that when we remove our provisional restoration or our healing abutment, whatever it is, we want to be able to communicate this to our lab. It's a paradigm shift in technique. It's not a paradigm shift in concept, because emergence profile has been around for decades. So typically teeth are removed. This is what you get, but there are other options. What if we could customize that emergence right at surgery and make this look just like a central incisor? What if we had a stock abutment that approximated the size of the tooth and we dropped it in? And so we can have an off the rack solution. We've got to figure this out. Why would we do this? There are a number of reasons, and now we're coalescing around this in our field. Because I'm going to submit to you tonight, and I think for you GPs out there, and you know this because you see your patients year after year. They look amazing at placement, but then over time, maybe things don't look as good. We have to stress emergence profile. Why? Well, first of all, it's hygiene friendly. Implant crowns are not teeth. Implants are not roots. And so we're putting an artificial device in someone's head, asking it to behave like the natural tooth next to it. That's not going to happen. So we want to game the system in our favor, and we need better support. And if you have good emergence, you're going to support the tissue. Depending on the biotype of that tissue, you'll have success or failure if you don't do that. We need a sulcus, and this is also important because Brent, and I'm going to bring this up right now for you, because you get narrow emergence profiles coming to the lab, do you wind up making more ridge lap type of restorations where the restoration emerges and it sits on the tissue?
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to do that because I worry about, being able to cleansability and everything, but we want to make sure we have a good, emergence profile rather than kind of a tomato on a stick type of thing. Yeah, so we do see that. Yeah.
This is crucial, and thanks for that answer. We're told all the time as GPs, hey, you got to have a good perio. It has to work out. You've got to probe the sulcus, but you can't probe a ridge lap. And so that becomes a problem, and I'm going to go into that in some detail. So let's agree on some principles first. We have to finally accept the fact that, digitally guided implant placement is here to stay. If you have technology, we have to justify not using it. We have to justify why wouldn't we use it? So we now have to finally live up to our reputation of we do things prosthetically guided. We also have to generate the emergence at surgery. And that is the paradigm shift here. We don't have to wait with a round non-anatomic healing abutment 3 months and then put a temp in and waste more time and money. We can do this at surgery. If you're a surgeon out there, this will be great for you. If you're a GP, your surgeon will help you with this. And we're going to talk about other concepts in terms of doing this. And why are we doing this? As I said, why is the question? We're doing this to optimize our results. Even if you follow everything, over time, you're going to have a compromise. So our patients don't get teeth, they get prostheses. And we build expectations to let them know that things will happen. And the emergence profile, that zone from the implant to the tissue, is no longer a dark closet. Things happen in there, and our labs have to know, hey, I want you to under contour this restoration because I don't want to press on the tissue and I don't want recession, which, believe me, if you press on it and you blanch it, depending on the biotype, a few years later, you're going to start to see a gray abutment. So these things are important, and our labs need to know that. And they also need to know what materials to use. So to send a impression that says A2 zirconia crown on an implant isn't good enough. We need to have polished material below the tissue, and our studies show now that the finest epithelial relationship, Dr. Levine's here is perio, is polished zirconia to tissue. That's the best faux attachment. Second is polished titanium. So in the bone channel and the tissue channel, you've got to have one of those. Third and last by a long shot is glazed ceramic, because glaze is actually pitted porcelain if you look at it microscopically, and it collects plaque. So we want to make sure that if we do Emax over a zirconia core, we don't want that going subgingival. So this is might feel like an academic point, but if you really want to go from good to great, this is going to become standard in the industry. Now, the workflow has pretty much been this. You send your patient to the surgeon, they put the implant in, and they send them back to you with a temp. And then you get what you get. The implant's sideways, it's crooked, it's perfect, it's potluck. Sometimes it's awesome and sometimes it isn't. And then Brent at the lab might not have even seen that patient in the treatment planning phase. But now it comes to us as the restorative doctors. We got to restore and maintain, and we have to troubleshoot. And this is where the issues come in. So many times we start cleaning up on aisle 3 much later on in the process. And what we're going to talk about tonight is to try to start it at the beginning. And the planning phase only requires 2 things. Somebody's got to do it, either the surgeon or the GP or both, an iOS scan and a DICOM scan. And those 2 scans get you set up to plan your case, to digitally plan it. Those get combined into an image. For the restorative procedure, we're going to digitally scan, and then our lab is going to do some milling, and some of you might even have printers out there. That's beyond our conversation, but it's certainly important. But somebody's got to make the restoration. We are in this paradigm, and we are moving to this paradigm. We have to figure out a way to do this faster, better, cheaper. And how are we going to do that? What's important? How can we get somebody like this? Well, in the analog world, we would take a tie base and put composite on it in a bloody field, and it wasn't any fun. And so most people don't do it. There are sutures there, it's bleeding. So we would pretty much wait with the round healing abutment until we would have integration, and then we can get in and work. Let's look at some other ideas. As I mentioned to you, the restoration has to have a sulcus. So the tissue has to overlay the restoration. And that can only happen with emergence profile. And so when you get your final restoration, this is what we want to be able to do. We can't probe a ridge lab. We need to be able to probe. That's going to really skyrocket and optimize your result. So let's look at two cases. One patient where you built a bicuspid anatomic emergence. And if you do that, what you'll notice is that the emergence profile starts and the crown emerges right at the spot that the emergence happens. And so you get a sulcus. That is the way we want to do it. And our lab knows how to do this. And when Brent's lab at Frontier did this, they understood exactly how to contour this based on my instructions, which was the biotype, where I wanted the contact and all that, what I wanted polished. Now let's go to another situation where we have a round healing abutment. Well, the tissue may form round. It may stay where it is. It's kind of potluck. But what happens? Because we have a round healing abutment, we now have ceramic facial to the emergence. And now when it's in the mouth, we get a ridge lap. We can't probe it. Now patients tolerate this and they say, oh, I'm so happy I have my crown, but you're going to see more recession. You're making a compromise. And this all happened for one reason. Somewhere in the food chain, we didn't actually generate emergence profile. And it's understandable because we haven't had a really good strategy, but now we do. So in 2025, what we're looking at is this. This is our ideal. We're going to start from this, and we're looking at a different setup now. We're looking at subcrestal implants, and GPs have to know this. If you ask the lab for a stock abutment and you don't specify the diameter, it might be too wide. It may not fit in the bone. Your surgeon's going to have to go back in and core the bone, and that's kind of a nightmare. Also, what I'm going to urge everybody, and I think this is a real recipe for success, is to take follow-up radiographs. We have to look at these things down the road. And, you know, this is a Straumann BLX implant. These really hold the bone, but it's all about planning and placement. And by the way, even if you do it perfectly, you may lose bone. Patients may not have the right protoplasm. Things can happen. We have to understand. Now, when we don't do the emergence, we get the ski slope. This is a case I didn't follow that pattern. We had a round healing abutment, but the crown has to come out facially. What can my technician do? Should I make it temporary and try to drive that tissue? Probably won't work. So some patients might tolerate this, others won't. And at our state now, we don't have to settle for it. We don't need to do that. We can use abutments and polyzirconia, even good quality vario-based stock abutments, in concert with our lab to get good emergence profile. And so when we get crowns in there now, we don't just ask Brent, make me a crown. We talk about zones. We say, here's the abutment I'd like. I'd like concave coming then. I want you to go ahead and reach the tissue at this point. This gives us the best chance for success. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than just taking a chance with what we have. And so when we look at the kind of restorations that we're asking our laboratories to do, we are looking at epithelial attachment. We're looking at zirconia and titanium subgingivally. But when we have that beautiful Emax on top and it's reaching that facial margin, we get that real nice, and that margin is right at the tissue. It's not below the tissue. This is a level of excellence that we can only achieve through teamwork and communication and a lab like Frontier that's actually going to understand what we could do. And there's a little bit of a learning curve. But if you go back in your x-rays, you go into next time you go into your hygiene department and take a film, your crowns are going to look a little different 5 or 10 years earlier for those of you who've been around. But this is where we're moving. So let's get into a few things here. Good surgeon here, no preparation of the emergence. And when the tooth is removed, you get what you get. And even with good patients, good home care, you don't have the walls of the tissue of the tooth holding up anymore. So you have an issue. So now you say, okay, well, let me just go ahead and digitally plan it. This is a lot of our patient base where you've got a nice crown, but you can't do anything with the tissue you've lost. You can't get it back. And you'll see that patients will complain about sensitivity on adjacent teeth. This is the biggest reason. Because we lost the tissue at surgery, it shrunk up, we didn't hold it. Remember, the teeth hold it like poles in a canvas tent. When you take the poles away, the canvas comes down. It doesn't miraculously come back later. When you put the crown in, it may come back a little bit. But when you lose it on the adjacent teeth, and that's where the sensitivity comes from. So we need to reflect and kind of say, hey, let's make let's leverage what's happening now. Here's our decision tree. Number one, if you can get an immediate temporary on there, it gives you the proper anatomic contour, contact points, psychological advantage, and emergence profile. If you can't, we want a custom healing abutment, one that actually fits that patient's mouth and wouldn't be good for another person's mouth. If for some reason you can't do that, we can use an anatomic healer, which is an average bicuspid or an average molar. And that's going to give us more functionality than this, which I predict within the next 5 years is going to be gone because this modality is so much faster. So let's look at how we do it. Well, the magic basically is the surgeons, or for those of you GPs who place, have embraced digital technology. You send your patient to the surgeon, he scans it, she scans it, puts a round healing abutment on, and then locally gets an immediate temp. This could be made in the office, right? So this type of thing's got to be done within 24 hours. Now, Brent, I wanted to engage you on this because this is a time-sensitive issue. So obviously in your geographic area, this is something that you could do. If you've got somebody that it's going to take multiple days turnover, I'm assuming that you will use the information here and then utilize this patient for your final restoration.
Absolutely, yeah, and we can do that even with the surgical planning and stuff like that. We can actually have the provisional already made prior to surgery, and that's very, very helpful and very powerful.
Yeah, there are a number of ways to do it, but I want to bring everyone into the room now and look at this, because when you take out a central incisor, it's not a circle, it's a triangle. You put the implant in, it's a circle. So typically what happens is that triangle remodels to a circle that our lab, we want them to rebuild it out. That just seems like a backwards way to do it. If we can get that provisional crown in that day or the next day, and we can get it, we can now see what's going to happen in 3 weeks. We can get a magnificent tissue response. Now we're halfway home, but we have to communicate that to our technician. How do we do that? With a beautiful scan, and we can even scan the provisional, and they will take that additional scan and create a beautiful restoration. And this is 2025 now, a tie base, polished zirconia in the bone channel, a gorgeous Emax crown. This is the angulated screw, which I'll get into, and that's really where we want to go. So this workflow has revolutionized emergence profile because it's taken the real pain out of it. We can digitally plan this rather than sit there and realign a temp in a bloody field, which nobody wants to do. So this is what our implant crowns can look like now. They look a little different. There's a lot of bone. There's a lot of zirconia, and we're getting success with that. I wanted to just touch upon some of the realities here. And for you really granular GPs, you understand that the facial palatal dimension of a central incisor can be thin. And if you put a screw hole in there, you will add a lot of ceramic onto the palate, which is objectionable. So you have to cement some of these. And we won't get into cement, but let's take a look at this. Same workflow, but the tip off is when we get the provisional back, you could see the screw holes coming through the incisal edge. So that has to be addressed either with a cement retained restoration or what we call the angulated screw abutment, which I'll talk about in a minute. For this patient, we went cement. And what do we get out of the provisional? You can't get this with a healing abutment. You can't get this with an Essex retainer. That's a few weeks after placement of the immediate provisional. And in a very thin biotype, we've got it there. So that is the beauty of this, to be able to plan it like this. And also titanium in the bone channel, but matching the bone channel, not impinging on the bone. That's what's crucial. If that gingival height is shorter, those shoulder walls of the tie base are going to impinge on the bone, and that's communication also. And that's why we're here tonight. This is provisional crown digitally generated emergence profile. That is not something that nature is going to do on its own. So we're guiding it that way. And we scan. And when we scan for our labs, we got to talk to them. They have to be able to see our emergence profile. It's properly maintained here. And here we chose a zirconia cemented abutment, and it's polished below the tissue, day of insertion. And even with a cemented abutment, you can see how the facial palatal dimension starting to thicken. Now, if you put a screw hole in there, you're going to encroach even more. This is one of the biggest problems of digital planning is we say, well, we're just going to do screw retain, but we don't respect the actual dimensions of the crown. And I'll get into that in a minute. Again, looking at us subgingivally under the hood, titanium and polished zirconia in the bone channel. Now, when we take a look at this gentleman, it gets a little bit more tricky. Same concept, tooth is coming out, we get the implant in, we scan, we send the patient home, the next day we get the provisional, pardon me, and now we're sort of snooping around and we're looking at this and saying, well, this screw hole is going to come through the facial, we're probably going to have to do a cement retained crown, but maybe not. So we get the temp back unretouched, and I asked for this from my lab locally because I was doing it in a day to do that, and then I filled the screw hole in with composite, and anyone could do that with just to clean it up. But we have to face the music on that. Now, let's say we want to do something, we want to screw this in. We have to talk about the angulated screw. So if you take a driver and you're vertical to the implant axis and you tilt the driver, it's going to skid out of the screw. You won't be able to actually do it. But what if you could alter the tie base and the screw system so that you could move the driver 25 degrees and screw the screw in at a different axis of the crown? You could actually take an incisal edge screw hole and reposition it to the palatal. That's a game changer. You can do that up to 25 degrees. So the tie base is modified, and then the driver can move. It's a different screw system, but it can be used, and this is what it looks like. And so when you go ahead and look at how the driver is in there, you actually are able to modify this. Now, there are a few concerns that we have to think about. When you modify the screw hole, it gets bigger. And when it gets bigger, you might be a little bit more prone to fracturing. Also, some of the tie bases are modified and they may not be as retentive. So it's better for shorter crowns than longer ones. But again, when we look at this modality, we were able to take this patient who pretty much was going to be a cement retain restoration. And with the angled screw, we were able to reposition the access, and we could figure that out digitally. So when you're digitally planning either surgeons or GPs, you can see, okay, here's where the implant's going. Well, here's where my screw hole is going to likely be. And I'll get to that in just a minute. And we're able to maintain the tissue. So this is, I want to kind of, sort of toot a little horn on this one because zirconia is very hard to match color-wise. And, the guys at Frontier did a knockout job on this because zirconia is tricky. Why? Because of the value. And all of us GPs know this, that they come back bright. It's very hard to do that, especially for a single central. But you can see the zirconia, you can see the narrowing of the tie base, and look at it 3 years later. So 3 years later, we've got exactly what we want in the bone channel. We've got septal bone, and everything's kind of working out for us. Now, if you get a patient that you decide, hey, you know what? I don't really feel like putting a temporary crown in this because I don't trust the patient. They have a low dental IQ. They tell you, doc, can I eat steak tonight? And you know that when you hear that, you don't want to do this, but you don't want to lose the emergence profile. Well, one thing you can do is go through the same workflow. Go ahead and have the implant placed, scan it at surgery, right? Implant gets placed, round healer. Now, many of us just stop here, put a flipper on top or an Essex retainer, but let's try something different. Let's go ahead and send the patient home with a flipper, and let's go ahead and fabricate not a provisional crown, but the portion of the provisional crown that's under the gum line. So imagine you cut a provisional crown off right at the gum line, you would have an anatomic healing abutment. And it's customized for this patient. So you get PMMA, and there it goes, that day or the next day. You really shouldn't screw around with it much after that because the bone starts to remodel. Well, let's look at what happened. We get the flipper over that relieved, and then here we go, and we have the implant placed, and 6 weeks later, we have customized emergence. Now, Brent, how many of your clients are actually using anatomic healing abutments?
Not many right now. I'd say probably less than 10%, but I think we're starting to get, definitely more with for the customized healing caps, which you'll talk about here in just a few minutes and everything like that.
Pardon me.
But
Yes.
it's getting into, and it really is a game changer. And I think it's very important to do. And like you were mentioning, we've made a ton of, anterior provisionals and everything where you can take it off and keep adding composite to it over time and everything like that. But I can see, this would be a much better workflow.
Thanks for that answer. And understand, folks, that this would be the gold standard because this anatomic healer actually matches. It's custom for this patient. But let's say we want something simpler. Let's say we have a round healer in a molar, but we don't want to do that. And by the way, that's the kind of emergence that you will get. That is what the lab wants, and that's what the crown wants. But let's look at a new treatment. This is a dual function healing abutment. It gives you emergence profile, and it has a chimney on it that you could scan. And so when you look at these are what we would call stock anatomic healing abutments, as opposed to what I just showed before, which would be custom designed just for that patient. But another modality is just for the surgeon or the GP to have a supply of these. And then after the implant is placed, these will go right in there. Now, what happens is once you place it in the mouth, the lab, and you scan it, the lab can actually use that scan, and they also have the healing abutment dimensions. And so you don't have to take this off while you scan it. So it is something that will come back from the surgeon. You scan it, and the lab will send you a crown and an abutment back. That's fantastic. What if you modify it? What if it comes back and it's too big or too small? Then you have to scan it for the lab. Here's how you would do it. You would place it on this device, and then you or the surgeon, or for you surgeons out there, you would modify the healing abutment very carefully, and then you would then go ahead and place it, scan it on this handle, the modifications that you made, and that file would be in your scanner. You would place it back onto the patient's mouth on the implant and scan it there. So the lab technician will have the chimney, which is the scan abutment attached to it, and they also have a file that shows your modifications. So if you modify a stock abutment, which is what this is, it becomes a customized abutment, and you have to tell the lab what you did. And this is the modality for it. And Brent, I know you were asking about this, but it's a very straightforward workflow that if you modify this. Now, this is a new technology, and industry is pushing us forward, and we'll see how it shakes out. But right now, the dual function is incredible. Now, if you put this in the anterior, you've got an issue because you got a little chimney sticking down, and your flipper or your Essex is going to have a trouble. So you'd have to hollow it out. So what I've been doing is full temporary crowns in the anterior. If we can't do that, full custom anatomic healers. And in the posterior, bicuspids and molars, I've been dropping these in to substitute for the round healing abutment, and that's a game changer because you're getting emergence profile and scannability, and as a GP, you haven't done anything different. The surgeon still treated the patient, but all they did was swap this out for a round healing abutment. So we're moving in that direction, and it's been very good. And then the lab is going to get that, and they're able to scan. I would urge you to go on YouTube and look at the full movies. We didn't put a movie on for bandwidth issues tonight, but basically, this is something that the lab will actually take the scan of your healing abutment, and they will go ahead and layer on a crown. They could see the dimensions of it. So this is a game changer. The take-home point that we have is whatever modality you use, whether it's immediate temporary crown, custom healer, stock, scannable, anatomic healer, we're all doing this for the same reason, so that at the time of surgery, we could generate emergence profile. And so when we get ready to restore, we can communicate that emergence profile without blanching the tissue. When you screw that crown in and the tissue starts turning white, that's a mismatch. It means our restoration doesn't match our emergence profile. And so that really comes down to who's involved here. And, it's a team sport. As the restorative doc, I like to call us the GPs, but this is what you're looking at. You have to match it up. So even if you didn't use anatomic emergence, the laboratory has to be able to know, hey, I have a wide, shallow opening. I have a thin opening. If you try to fit the crown on the left in an emergence for the crown on the right, you'll have a mismatch. the success that we have also is pretty much based on what I would call fairy dust, which is biotype. So you can only get nice results like this with a fantastic lab technician, but you also need the tissue, because if you don't have the tissue, you're not going to be able to do that. And that's where we build expectations for our patient. So let's just briefly get into the planning before we get into the home stretch here. Crucial for planning, only two things, and the GP and the surgeon have to be in concert with the lab, right? This is the iOS scan. It doesn't do anything for us unless we utilize it. The CBCT doesn't do anything unless we utilize it. They have to be merged. And the way they get merged, let's take a program like Code Diagnostics. Everyone here, even our technicians, can look at this and say, okay, what's happening here? Well, we could see that the screw hole is close to the incisal edge. We could also see something else, and I don't have a pointer here, but we could see how digitally the program put a lot of material palatally. And that's what I meant about the facial lingual thickness of these restorations, that you have to be careful. If you have an anatomically correct restoration digitally here, suddenly your screw hole is going to be too close to the edge. It may have to be moved. So you can't plan something properly like this. And if you get something from a surgeon, or you surgeons, if you plan like this, you're planning implants in bone with fake teeth. And so the screw hole that you put in there, or the emergence profile, it's not a real tooth. No GP is going to restore that. A GP is going to restore this. And once they anatomically correct it digitally, well, now the implant's too facial, it's out of the bone. So mistakes, there's not a lot of redundancy in our system, like an airplane where there's so many redundant systems that prevent failure. Here, I call it a force multiplier, that if there's a planning issue, it's going to multiply out to the restoration, and it gets worse and worse. So these are some subtle points that I think are good for discussion as well. And that's what I call the referral concept. And the referral concept is, we got to talk to each other. So, egos aside, GPs, surgeons can do a lot for us. Surgeons, the GPs are going to really talk to you about the restorations. Don't buy an iOS system and just start, putting down digital teeth without understanding the prosthetics. And both of you have to engage the lab like Frontier, because ultimately they're making the restoration. So you're going to live or die with the quality work that they do for you. And in our patient that you're going to see in your office tomorrow or Monday, the old plan was take the teeth out, take out number 5, take out 18 and 19, get some implants in. But wait a minute, let's look at this. Keep in mind, a tooth is not an implant. Different contour, different length. They don't behave the same. And so when we look at this patient from the planning phase, we have to talk about this as a GP. And we have to think about what's going to happen. And we're going to take those files, we're going to put them together, and we're going to generate a plan. And when you anatomically see the plan that's correct on there, guess what happens? You now see, if you look at the black arrow, now you go to the digital plan and the tooth looks a little bit different. The screw hole looks a little different. So the crucial aspect is, when you digitally plan this, whether your lab does it for you, whether you do it through Code Diagnostics, your surgeon does it, or you do it, you have to first start out and anatomically make a restoration that makes sense. Don't go with the default of the planning software, modify it. And in a case like this, where we didn't have vertical bone, consider getting out of the box and talking about a different implant. Here we didn't have enough vertical, so what we did was a tissue level implant. Didn't bother to keep slopping on bone vertically, which would take a long time and may not work. And so we're able to go ahead and engage a tissue level implant that was above the tissue, right? So this is kind of pulling out all the stops. Surgical guides milled or printed. Surgeons go ahead and place. This is the best chance of success we have. And in dentistry, we're doing this now, but in any other industry, whether it's aerospace or engineering or architecture, they all use templates. We somehow freehand things and hope and cross our fingers and hope for the best. That's not good enough anymore. So we've got to use guides. And when we use guides, we scan, we can augment with subconnective tissue grafts right there, and we can get anatomic healers, and we can go on to our restorations. So why are we here tonight? Because planning gives us our implants exactly where we need them. This is the Scott Gans triangle of bone, and form follows function. And so when you place the implant correctly and plan it, you're going to get the emergence profile. You're going to get be able to hold on. You're going to send the technicians lots of photos of shades. They don't want a lab slip that says A1, and you're going to get the emergence profile that you're looking for. In closing, I wanted to show you that in the real world, we have to think outside the box, and sometimes we don't get the emergence profile at the time of surgery. Very challenging case, trauma. I worked on this with Frontier, and we worked through this, and it was really challenging. Perio teeth, we tried to extrude them, as we all know, to bring bone and tissue down. A lot of tissue came down, not a lot of bone, but we found that on number 8, we didn't have any bone, and it wasn't going to be the kind of a case where we were going to jump in and do a lot of augmentation. So we cantilevered 8 off of 7, and that's okay. That's okay to do in the right situation. But when the case comes back from the surgeon and you have no anatomy, and you take an impression of this and you tell the lab, hey, make me a nice 2-unit cantilevered bridge, what are they going to do? It looks like the surface of the moon. Now we have to work backwards. Now we have to go ahead and get a provisional with our lab and talk to them and say, hey, we need to generate emergence profile. So not every patient can we do it at surgery, or not every surgeon knows how to do it. So you might see a round healer come back, build a temporary, and now look what you can do with that temporary. And now we're going to be home free here, because now we can send this to the lab, and our lab can look at this, and we're going to wind up in a situation where we're going to be able to do this. And even our result, and I considered this an A+ by the technicians, because if you look at the minutia of the incisal edges, just getting the contours, you can see GPs out there between 7 and 8, we still have a very long contact. It's not a natural contact. We've still lost some tissue. And so what I'm saying to you all is, even if you follow all the rules, you're going to get a compromise. But what is the main thing we talked about? These are probable sulcuses, and that's the main thing. So this was kind of a short tour tonight to kind of engage everybody by, not, and I don't think that, Dr. Covey's statement ever is worn out. We have to know where we're going before we get in the car and turn on the ignition. And that means engaging our labs like Frontier, engaging our implant companies, talking with our surgeons and GPs, making sure we have a plan and a backup plan, and adjusting expectations for our patient. And so the vision and the strategy count, but the real rubber hits the road when we execute. Because that's how we meet with success. And success is a moving target, because we've overpromised as a field, and we tell patients this is it, it's going to last forever. And for those of you who've been around a while, you see that we have complications, many restorative complications. We need a relationship with the laboratory, because they have to help us with complications. If something breaks in 2 years, what do we do? So we need to have that conversation. So it's a lot of stuff, and I can't tell you how privileged and honored I am to be joining such a group here tonight. This was a lot of fun, and I'm going to give you some information for myself and for Brent at Frontier. And what you have here is my contact. You can talk to me privately on WhatsApp, and you can scan my QR there. And I also have a website, and I'm always happy to do some consulting one-on-one. I do a lot of talks around the country. Come to your study group. This was sort of just the appetizers of what we can do. But the real fun and the integration comes when we can sit down and treatment plan cases, because everybody's going to have a different case. So much appreciated for this. I'm also going to go ahead and pass you on to Brent. He's going to also wrap up here and talk to you about his lab. I want to offer tremendous thanks for the support I get from Frontier. Lauren, you were terrific with your support of this venue. And to all of you out there, we are one as the dental field, and there's nothing like us. We just have to keep pushing forward and just getting better and better. So thank you. Brent, I want to just pass it over to you before we get to questions.
Thanks, Dr. Langstein. And I actually have some questions for you also, because every time I see your presentation, I get more questions in my mind for the lab side anyway. Yeah, thank you very much. You can see this is our laboratory in El Dorado Hills, California. My business partner, my partner in crime, Gil is here. You can find him on Instagram. He is the Instagram guy and has lots of education, showcases these cases as well too. QR code there to get some information about that, but would love to do more for you that. And